Hey guys, it's the Metal 5, and during my response to Velicify's top 10 most disappointing Pokemon in Sun and Moon, I very briefly mentioned that I wanted to make a video discussing why I think that both Leafeon and Glaceon are underrated. At one point in time, I considered doing a top 10 underrated Pokemon countdown, but I ended up finding more than 10 that I find really underrated and was unable to select just 10 that I would be satisfied with, and I'm not crazy enough to make another top 20 or even 30 video. But Leafeon and Glaceon were entries for that list that I felt very passionate to talk about because they're honestly both tied for being my favorite evolution. At first it was just because I love their designs the most out of all of them, since I think they have a combination of looking both cute and cool. But when I finally found the opportunity to use them on teams to see how they are in battle, it made me like them even more, which makes the fact that they both get a bad rep all the more bothersome to me, because I think that there are some really good things about these two Pokemon that most people overlook. Starting off with Leafeon, because its name is first in the title, I've got nothing. When Leafeon first became a thing in Gen 4, I found the negative reaction it got then to be understandable, because it had a really bad level up moveset. The best move for this Pokemon to have is Leaf Blade, which it only learns at level 71, with no other Grass-type moves that complement its stats aside from Razor Leaf, which is all the way back at level 15. Plus Swords Dance, another essential move for Leafeon to have, isn't learned until level 78, so you're stuck with very underwhelming moves for so long. What further adds salt in the wound is the fact that other moves which are really good for Leafeon to have, such as X-Scissor, are only learned via TM. This mostly stayed true for Black and White as well, except upon reaching Black and White 2, where Leafeon got a much better moveset. While Leaf Blade is the last move it learns leveling up, it only requires reaching level 45 this time, which makes the challenge of using only Razor Leaf as an effective Grass-type move much less painful. Plus, it learns Swords Dance at a much earlier level as well. It sucks that it can still only learn X-Scissor through TM, but it's still an improvement. As for Leafeon stats, while having its highest stat being defense is an issue due to Grass having the most weaknesses, I think that its 110 attack stat makes up for it, because combined with the strong physical moves that it now learns much earlier, along with its good speed, Leafeon can easily sweep opponents from my experience with it. I wanted to use a Leafeon on a team for so long, but never had a good opportunity to do so, because in Gen 4, I always picked Turtwig, because Torterra is my favorite Pokemon, and I don't want two Grass types on one team. In Black and White 1, you can't get Eevee until the after game. In Black and White 2, while you can get an Eevee early on, you can't access the Mossy Rock until the after game. And in X and Y, you don't reach the Mossy Rock until just before the 8th gym, which is an Ice-type gym. But in Sun and Moon, not only do you get an Eevee shortly after starting Akala Island, but the Mossy Rock isn't that long after. So yes, I do use a Leafeon on my Moon team, and I found it to be such an effective physical attacker. Now more recently, it appears that Leafeon gets a little bit of a better reception than it did in the past, but unfortunately Glaceon didn't end up getting the same treatment. So it's going to be harder for me to explain myself here. The main criticism I see of Glaceon comes from a combination of its type and stats. Glaceon has the exact same special attack stat as Espeon, which is considered one of the best evolutions, but less speed in return for having much more defense while still having good special defense. So Glaceon is essentially a bulkier Espeon. The reason why this draws criticism is because Glaceon is a pure Ice type, which isn't good defensively, and while I will admit that is true, like what I said in my response to Velicify, I personally feel that when many people complain about Pokemon for being defensive when it resists very few types, in Glaceon's case it only resists Ice, they seem to completely overlook the type that deals normal damage to it, because that's also important when being defensive. With my experience with Glaceon, I found its defenses to work wonders for it, as it barely took any damage from types dealing neutral damage. And I remember it once getting hit with a very strong Fire-type move. I think it might have been Fire Blast, but I don't exactly remember that part. And it did less than a third of its health. As for its moveset, it suffers from the same issue that Leafeon did in the past, except this time it was never improved aside from the level requirements being lowered starting with Black and White 2. Very few special moves, with the only strong one being Blizzard, because for some insane reason, Game Freak never gave it the ability to learn Ice Beam naturally. And it can't even learn moves like Calm Mind at all, which would have been incredibly helpful for it. So you do have to rely on TMs to make Glaceon more viable in battle. And I don't mean to sound like a jackass when saying this, but since I see some people who don't get this, if you have to rely on TMs to make a Pokemon good in battle, then that's still a problem. It's a way of mitigating the issues of having a bad level up moveset, but it doesn't automatically make that issue non-existent. So yes, objectively, I do think that Glaceon isn't as useful as Leafeon, but when I finally got an opportunity to use a Glaceon myself in a playthrough of Platinum, while it was a pain in the ass to keep an Eevee in my party for so long, I found the payoff to be so worth it when it evolved into a Glaceon, after teaching it Ice Beam and Shadow Ball, because it quickly became one of my strongest team members, and made battling Candace a cinch when normally I find her very challenging in Platinum. The only other thing that I agree with people on when it comes to Glaceon's problems is that its ability sucks, since Snowcloak is a very situationally useful ability because Ice is the only type immune to Hail. But anyway, that's just my stupid and valid opinion as to why I think Leafeon and Glaceon are underrated Pokemon.